Not playing this game. I'm not doing this. Sorry, I reached my limit. Okay. So I'm gonna be the first to admit that I did not expect to have so many culture shocks in moving to Macau. But culture shocks there were, and I'm gonna save the most shocking one for last. So in no particular order, one of the things that shocked me about moving from Macau, of course I moved from Las Vegas to Macau to come to work, was when I had to find an apartment. That was definitely a shock. I mean, in the States, when you're looking for an apartment, you'll go to an apartment complex, you'll talk to the management office, might even get an apartment that same day. Here in Macau, I guess the thing that shocked me the most was that I needed to pay 4 months worth of rent at one time. So let me explain what that means. I had to pay the first month's rent, 2 months deposit, and 1 month's rent to the agent as their commission. I mean, and rents were not cheap when I got here. I mean, my first apartment was probably $1,800 a month. So $1,800 times 4, that's a lot of cash to lay out when, you know, you're not really used to that. You're used to 1 month's rent, 1 month deposit, you're on your way. And even some places, if you're renting out a house or something, they'll let you break out the deposit between 2 months or whatever. But man, 4 months rent, like that, bam, gone. It was kind of a shock to me. So yeah, I would say that was definitely the first shock that I got when I got to Macau. I guess if I had to name a second shock, and again, not all these shocks are negative. I would say I was shocked at how good public transportation has been in Macau. I mean, in Vegas, it's just impossible to live in Vegas without having a car. But in Macau, public transportation is so great, and Macau is so small that you can get around super easy. And that was kind of a shock to me. So I've been out here for 4.5 years now, and I've yet to own a car. Secondly, if you work for one of the casinos out here, there's basically employee shuttle buses where the company, the casino, will send a shuttle to different parts of the city, and they'll pick up their employees to get them to work. That blew my mind. I mean, could you imagine almost any employer in the US sending out shuttle buses to pick up their employees? That was just unbelievable to me. I mean, in a great way, because now it's been 4.5 years, no car insurance, no gas. I love it. I love not having to worry about having a car. All right, so here's another one. And you probably hear this a lot coming from people that have lived in Asia or been to Asia. Personal space. Shoving, pushing, personal space, lack of queues, lack of the ability for people to queue up. It's a thing. You just have to deal with it. I mean, when I was getting out of work and had to actually take the bus to get home, you had to find your way into the bus somehow or another, because people were not gonna queue up. People were not gonna let you get on the bus unless you really sort of what would be considered rude in the States, cutting someone off, getting in front of someone. You know, it's just what you got to do. You just have to get with it. I guess my biggest fear now is going back to the States and sort of keeping this with me, which I'll just have to keep in check when I go back, I guess. But that was definitely one of them. It's like, man, and these buses, they do get crammed. They get packed. I'm talking sardine can. You know, it's stuffed in there, uncomfortably stuffed. Long day working with other people in a bus. Yeah, that was one of them. So if you got personal space issues, if you don't like people getting too close to you, if you don't like finding your way, or you know, sort of giving someone a nudge, like, hey, I got to get off this bus, or hey, I got to get on this bus, you know, I'm trying to go home too. Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I mean, it was not that easy for me, but you do get used to it. And I guess what I'll say about that is you have to. Think about it. This is one of the most densest places in the world. I mean, I'll bump into someone now and I don't stop and say I'm sorry, because they don't stop and do that for me either. So it's pretty normal, and I get it. Densest places in the world, people got places to be, places to go. I mean, if you did that, stopped and did that all day, it just doesn't make sense. So, you know, I don't really consider it as not. I used to consider it as rude, you know, like someone bumps into you, you know, you say, hey, I'm sorry, you move on. But I just don't even bother with it anymore. I just move on with my day. Don't even give it a thought anymore. So that's definitely something that was different than what I was used to. Eating out, going to restaurants, a little different than back home, back in the States. First off, I guess the thing that was a little bit different for me was that if you're going out with someone, if you're going out with a group of people, and you all order your dish, it's just gonna come out whenever that dish is ready. I mean, some fancier places might ask you, hey, do you want it all together? Do you want it one at a time? But most places, I'm talking 95% of most places, they're just gonna bring out whatever food is ready to eat. Okay, so if you ordered your meal and so did the person you're with order their meal, and yours comes out first, and theirs takes another 5 minutes to come out, that's just the way it is. And that kind of sucks, because I'm just really not used to that. I mean, in the States, especially because I work as a server, I know that it's really important to get everyone's meal out, because you don't want anyone to feel left out. You don't want other people to feel like it's rude for them to start eating while somebody hasn't received their meal. So I get that, but here it's just different. And I think the reason it's different is because a lot of food is ordered family style. And what I mean by that is that everyone shares their meal. And actually, I've gotten quite used to this. And I'm actually starting to enjoy it because, especially in a Chinese restaurant, there's no entrees where you get your meat and your two sides or whatever. It's really, this is a plate of fried rice, and this is a plate of barbecue pork, and this is a plate of, you know, chicken or whatever it is, and therefore you can all eat different things. And it's really nice because I want something and they want something, and what's really funny is there's this little sort of like coordination, like, okay, I will get the barbecue if you get that dim sum, and then we'll share, and then we'll split it. So it's kind of like a little give and take, which has become quite fun. But that's the reason that they do that, is because there's no real concept of an entree. It's just everything is shared, which is pretty typical of Asian food. So that's part of the reason that's done. So I've sort of come to enjoy that since I've gotten here in Macau. One thing that I still can't get used to is some of the really local places, and even some of the not so local places. Yeah, there's no napkins. Like, first time I went to a restaurant, I was like, can I get a napkin? But there's no napkins at my table. You know what I got? I got a roll of tissue paper, which was super weird to me. I'm like, what's the implication here? Because this is tissue paper. So apparently what happens is if you go to a place that doesn't have you know, something to wipe yourself down with, they'll sell you a little pack of actual I just said the word, I can't remember it, napkins. So they'll sell you these napkins, so they don't want to provide them so that they can sell them to you. I mean, and it doesn't cost anything, but I just thought that's one of those things that was funny. All right, so here is by far the most shocking thing that I've had to deal with living in Macau, living in Asia. Because actually, when it happened to me, I have to be honest, I have to be fair. When it happened to me, I was in Shanghai, I was on a tour, I was the only Westerner there, and I was just like, I'm not playing this game. I'm not doing this. Sorry, I reached my limit. Okay, so here's the story for that. So when you eat, everyone has their chopsticks, and in some fancier places, you'll get two sets of chopsticks. You get one chopstick for eating, one set of chopsticks for eating, and you'll have another set of chopsticks that you will use to grab the food that is, you know, on the table. And that's nice, because then you're not picking food that other people are eating with from the same pair of chopsticks. But man, I mean, it's happened to me here in Macau, and it's not that big a deal. Like, for the most part, I'm with someone I know. I don't eat with strangers, so it's not that big a deal. And I'm still careful about where I pick my food from, right? But so anyways, I was in Shanghai, and I was on a tour with these people that I didn't know. They didn't know each other, they didn't know us, and the tour bus would stop for lunch, and we would stop at these places to have lunch, and the lunch would come out and everyone would just start picking their food, and then they would start eating, right? Which is great when it all starts, but then there is no second pair of chopsticks. Everyone is just grabbing food as they can, and a lot of times the dishes don't have like spoons or utensils to grab the food and put it on your plate, so you use your own chopsticks. Well, look, this is where I draw the line. Strangers I don't know using their own chopsticks out of their own mouths back into the food that everyone's sharing. And I'm gonna tell you, there was some stuff that was like in sort of a soup base, like a fish or something. Yeah, I'm not touching that. Anyways, if you want to know how to get around that, be the first to grab that meal, all right? Because otherwise you're not eating it. At least I'm not eating it. I don't know about you, but I can't do it. I can't share something, a chopstick, spit in your mouth. You're gonna put it in a stew or a soup or something, and no, just no, I can't do it. I'm sorry, it's too much of a shock. But that was interesting.